There are some houses people avoid because they look abandoned. There are others people avoid because of rumors. And then there are houses so cheap that nobody asks the right question until it's too late. When Emily and Daniel moved into the cheapest house outside Boone, it felt like they had gotten lucky. The place was old, isolated, and badly neglected, but the rent was far below anything else in the area. Daniel saw it as a bargain. Emily saw it as a temporary inconvenience. What neither understood was that the house stayed cheap because the last man who lived there spent years feeding something inside it. And once Emily cleaned the place from top to bottom, that thing got hungry again. Daniel was the first one to change, but he would not be the last thing in that house to stop acting human. Daniel Carter had always been an easy man to understand, practical about everything and impossible to surprise. Emily was already several months pregnant, tired, sensitive to smells, and in no mood for a stressful move. The house sat far from the road, with no neighbors close enough to make Emily feel comfortable. The grass was thick and uneven, the shrubs choked with dust, and the stone path shifted underfoot. Even before going inside, Emily felt a deep, constant discomfort, like someone was already there, quietly watching. Daniel ignored that. The rent was absurdly low, and to him that was all that mattered. The moment they opened the door, the smell hit her, thick, rotten, and damp, like mold and something burned. Filth gathered in strange places. Clumps of dust, hair, old feathers, and thick webbing in nearly every corner. Several walls carried black stains long and narrow, enough to resemble claw marks. A narrow drainage ditch ran behind the structure, clogged with dark water, broken brooms, and coils of matted hair. That was when Martha arrived. She had worked for the previous owner for years and knew the property well, but Martha would not touch the dirt, feathers, and webs in the corners. She didn't forget she avoided them. Martha explained the previous owner left those things on purpose. He was trying to keep something fed. Cooney and Booney, two female entities drawn to rot, dust, blood, and stale neglect. Emily dismissed it as rural superstition and fired Martha on the spot, deciding to clean the rest herself. The deeper she cleaned, the stranger it became. She found an old funeral photograph and an old notebook. The notebook contained an invocation asking Cooney and Booney to wake, accept blood, and guard the home. Emily tore down the webs, gathered the filth, and burned it outside with kerosene. The house seemed cleaner, more normal. That illusion did not last through the night. Emily woke after midnight to the smell of wet soil and a sound from behind the house. It rose and fell in long, hollow pulses, like someone blowing across an old bottle. A rhythmic call. In the morning, Emily found fresh webs in the corners, dense enough to seem impossible after a single night. After the back brush was cut and burned, the webs stopped, but that marked a new, terrifying change. One evening, Daniel came home with fried chicken. He had been a vegetarian his entire life. Soon he wanted it constantly. Emily, sensitive to smells during pregnancy, found the change unbearable. One morning she found the fridge empty of raw meat. A bowl had been wiped clean as if washed. Then Emily saw him come home with a live chicken. He claimed it was more hygienic to butcher it at home. There was no hesitation, just a quiet certainty that made him sound like someone following instructions. There are some sounds people ignore because they don't make sense. A creak in the wall, a faint knock at night, something shifting just out of sight. Most people explain those things away, but in some houses, those sounds are not the house settling. There's something else trying to move. And in one case, a couple in Ohio learned that the thing moving inside their walls had been living there long before they arrived. When Mark and Jessica Collins moved into their new home just outside Dayton, it felt like a good decision. The house wasn't perfect, but it was affordable, quiet, and far enough from the city to feel peaceful. It had been sitting unsold for a while, But the realtor explained the previous owner had passed away, and the family wanted to move it quickly. Jessica noticed it more than Mark did. She always had a sharper sense for small details, especially sounds. The first time she heard it, it was late at night. A faint tapping. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall behind their bedroom. At first, she thought it might be pipes. But then the tapping changed. It became slower, more deliberate, like something was responding. She told Mark the next morning. He brushed it off immediately. "Old house," he said. Things shift until the sounds started happening during the day. It wasn't just tapping anymore. Sometimes it sounded like something dragging from the basement to the first floor to right behind their bedroom. One evening, Jessica stood in the hallway, completely still, listening. Mark was in the kitchen. The house was quiet. And from inside the wall beside her, she heard it clearly. A faint scraping, followed by what sounded like breathing. That was the first time she felt real fear. They decided to check the basement. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed pipes, and one section of the wall that looked different. Slightly newer. Mark tapped on it. It sounded hollow. He found a small panel near the bottom corner. It wasn't locked, just loosely fitted. When he pulled it open, a cold, stale smell rushed out, stronger than anything they had smelled before. Rotten, wet, old. Mark used his phone flashlight and pointed it inside. At first, there was nothing, just darkness. Then the light caught something. Scratches, long, uneven marks along the inside of the wall, deep enough to carve into the wood. Jessica stepped back immediately. "Close it," she said. But Mark didn't, because he had seen something else. At the very back of the space, something shifted. Not clearly, not enough to identify, just a movement. And then, a sound. A slow inhale from inside the wall. Mark slammed the panel shut. That night, neither of them slept. Around 2 a.m., the sound came back, but this time, it wasn't inside the walls. It was in the room, a soft movement, near the door. Jessica opened her eyes first, and saw it. Mark turned on the light. Nothing was there, but the wall behind that corner had fresh scratches on it, deeper than before. The realtor finally admitted something. The previous owner had been found in the basement, near that same wall. Mark and Jessica moved out within a week, left most of their belongings behind. The house is still standing, still unsold. If you ever hear something inside your walls, don't assume it's just the house settling, because in some places, the walls are not empty. This story was sent to me by a man named Daniel. It's one of those situations that feels normal at first, until one detail changes everything. Daniel had just moved into a new apartment. Nothing fancy. Second floor, small building, quiet neighborhood. The kind of place where nothing really happens. He lived alone, worked late shifts, and usually got home sometime after 11 p.m. The routine was always the same. Unlock the door, step inside, lock it again immediately. That part mattered to him, because Daniel was the kind of person who double-checks things. Doors, windows, even the stove, everything had to be secured before he could relax. About 2 weeks after moving in, something small started bothering him. Every time he came home, something felt slightly off. Not enough to panic, just enough to notice. Sometimes the living room felt colder than it should. Sometimes the air felt used, like someone had been there before him. But he always brushed it off. New place, new environment. Your brain plays tricks on you. Then one night, something changed. He got home later than usual, close to midnight. The building was quiet, almost completely silent. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, and locked it behind him, just like always. And then he noticed it. His bedroom door was slightly open. That wasn't normal. Daniel always kept that door fully closed before leaving. Not halfway, not cracked, closed. He stood there for a moment, staring at it, trying to remember if maybe, just maybe, he had left it that way. But the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. He didn't. He didn't turn on all the lights. He just slowly walked toward the bedroom. Each step felt louder than it should have. The apartment was too quiet. When he reached the door, he pushed it open. The room looked normal. Bed untouched, window closed. Nothing missing. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, and that should have been the end of it. But then he noticed something else. His closet door was open. Now that made his stomach drop, because he never left that open. Not once. He stood there, just staring at the dark space inside. No movement, no sound, just darkness. At that point, he told himself he was being stupid. It's just a closet. So he stepped forward and pulled the door open wider. Nothing. Clothes hanging normally. Shoes on the floor. No one inside. That's when he finally relaxed. Just a weird coincidence. Maybe he really had left things like that without noticing. It happens. But as he turned to leave the room, he heard something behind him. A soft shift. Not loud, not clear, but real. He turned around immediately. The closet looked exactly the same. Still, silent, and that's when he saw it. Something was slightly different. The clothes had moved. Not swinging, not falling. Just not sitting the way they were before. Like something had just pushed through them. Daniel didn't check again. He didn't step closer. He didn't call out. He walked straight out of the room, closed the bedroom door, locked it, and then left the apartment. He spent the rest of the night in his car. The next morning, he came back with a friend. They unlocked the door together. Everything looked normal again. Bedroom door closed, closet shut, nothing out of place. His friend laughed it off, said he was just tired, overthinking, and for a moment, Daniel almost believed that too, until they checked the front door lock. It was still locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No way anyone could have left. Which meant one thing. Whatever had moved inside that closet didn't come in after Daniel. It was already there,